Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. Thank you so much for being here. Let's just dive right in, shall we? So yeah, sorry about last week. Missed a week of episodes. I've been pretty good, actually shockingly good by my standards as far as being consistent with a weekly podcast. But last week I just wasn't feeling it. And sometimes waiting for inspiration to hit means you don't get something done. I don't know. It's just been, I think the kind of the funk of being in quarantine has caught up to me. And, when it started, I was like in a actually really nice place energetically. And I started like this exercise routine and I was like all dialed in and feeling great. And then at about halfway through April, Jen and I started pushing hard for this big goal that we had for our essential oils business. So started working a lot more than we had been. And at the same time, we found out that the place where we live has termites. And so fortunately, like we're in this like old, mostly concrete building here in Florida. But there's like wood, the door frame, there's like I don't know, what do you call it? Like basically like the door frame apparently is covered in, or like inside of it is full of termites. And I don't know if they had some sort of mating season or whatever, but our patio was covered with the wings. It was so gross. And that's where we like to do our exercise and stuff. And I'd been doing this training with this guy, Brian Aganon, who's, I guess I don't even know what he is. He's a personal trainer, I suppose. But he teaches people how to do press to handstand in yoga. Now, I'm like super far away from that, but he had this like core training exercise that I was doing that involves like L-sits where you're pushing up on a block and doing all these things. And so we had outside where we had our little setup, we had our yoga mat and then these cork blocks. And we saw the termites, so it was like super gross. Cleaned it up as best we could, but like the wings were flying everywhere. It was like super nasty. And it didn't even occur to me that the cork blocks might be like a refuge, like a safe place for the termites. And so one day I went over there because I didn't work out when it was covered in the termites. And so I was like, all right, I got to get back in my workouts. And so I was like, I'm going to just deal with it. Like there were still some termites that were coming out, like the wings, you could tell that they like had a party the night before or whatever. And I went over to the yoga blocks and I picked it up. And as soon as I touched them, it was like all of these termite maggot things had crawled into the cork blocks and it was covered. It was so gross. Oh my God, it was so nasty. And so that quickly brought to an end my using of the cork blocks. I mean, I sprayed them, I cleaned it up, I sprayed them with all sorts of essential oils and stuff, but I didn't want to bring the blocks inside the house. So it got better, but they were like still finding their way into them. And so eventually we had to get rid of them, which really sucked environmentally. But the new ones that we've ordered, the new like non-cork blocks haven't come yet. So that really just it just kind of killed the momentum of my exercise. I let that circumstance make the decision easy for me just to get kind of lazy. And it's been interesting to see how without exercising, like the motivation just really like went away, and how so much of my kind of creativity and drive and passion is tied into physical movement and exercise and being outside and being at the beach and all of that. And so when all of that wasn't happening for me, I just couldn't find the inspiration to do a podcast last week. But the termites were just so intense. And so like we had this guy come to the house. He was like, we called our landlord, like the building manager guy. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to get someone out. It took him like 4 days. And this old Cuban guy showed up. You think he was like 82, 85 years old, something like that. And he's like knocking on the door frame, listening for where it's hollow and where it's been chewed out. And so it was pretty clear on the outside patio where the problem was. But one of our bathrooms in our place was also covered in termites. So all these termites came through the vents, which is so gross. And so like Jen wouldn't go in the bathroom for like 2 weeks. And I had to put all this tape up on the vents, and like you just saw these like dead termites that got stuck to the tape. It was so nasty. But like he didn't really have an explanation as to where those were coming from. So I suspect, I don't know how it works. Maybe they were coming from the roof and they found a way into like the ventilation duct or whatever. But yeah, it was like really nasty. So this guy came out and he did the inspection, gave us the treatment plans. We're going to just do like a spot treatment for it. And the dude hasn't come back. So I reached out to him and he was like, oh yeah, I'll call you for, to set up a time, and never heard from him again. And that's kind of like how living in Miami goes. But the termite situation seems to be better. I started getting back into some exercise without the blocks, and feeling better. So here we are. That's a really long way to say why I didn't have a podcast last week. What else has happened? So in this last week, I've had a kind of a fun time so right before quarantine, like right before like sheltering in or cutting down, stopping travel, like became a thing, literally the weekend before in early March for us, I went to Mexico City with a bunch of old friends from high school. Now, some of these guys I haven't had a conversation with in well over 10 years. It was funny. The first kind of breakfast, one of my friends and I were up. We were the ones who were up early, and we were having a coffee in the patio there in Mexico City. And it was basically like, well, tell me about your life in the last 15 years. And so it's been great to catch up with these guys. So we've been on this thread, this text thread, which has just brought so much joy into my life. And one of the things that just sort of started to happen was that people started sharing music. And so each person was kind of given a week, and each day they were asked to share music that's been important to them. Or I think it might have been, the original cue might have been like share music that's like current and relevant. But I don't, when it got to be my week this last week, I realized that I don't really have a lot of music that's current and that's new from new people. A lot of music that I still think is relevant, of course, but it's been fun to go through like my music. And if you had, people that you were close with or that you shared a lot of time with, but you hadn't seen in a while, like what's the music that you would share with them? I'd love to hear, hit me up on Instagram or send me a message here at pleasurepointspodcast@gmail. And I'd love to hear like, what is some of the music that you're listening to? What is the stuff that like, if you had like 5 or 7 albums in particular to share with me or with people that were close to you, people that you had, that knew you well, but maybe you hadn't kept up, like what's the music that has been really meaningful to you in the last like 10 years or so. So the first, when it was my day, it was my week this past week, and the first artist that I wanted to share was Tom Waits. So I don't know, like if you guys are Tom Waits fans or not, but like Tom Waits, to me is hands down, he's brilliant. And he is, I think of all of the, like if there was a soundtrack to my life, all of the big emotional moments, Tom Waits' music is it. Like his songs from the original, like the Closing Time, which I think came out in the early 70s. I don't remember when it came out, maybe the late 60s. Closing Time to the album that I shared with my high school buddies was Mule Variations, which came out in, I think 2010, 2012. I don't remember. But like if there's one album to start with, I would say Mule Variations, because it's so, so good. Come On Up to the House, Hold On. I mean, it's a phenomenal, phenomenal album. And the songwriting there is incredible. It's on that album that one of my favorite lyrics of all time is on, where he says, it's from Come On Up to the House. And he says, get down off the cross, we can use the wood. I probably think about that line at least once a week. It's like, quit being the martyr. Like, we could use that wood. Come on back, come on home to yourself. Come on home to all of us. Come on back to the community. And man, Tom Waits was just amazing. But one of the songs that I really wanted to share with them, but it's not on Spotify, it hasn't actually been released, is the Tom Waits song that he sang when David Letterman was saying goodbye in those final few months of the David Letterman show. Tom Waits came on and he performed a new song that I haven't been able to find a recording of anywhere except from the David Letterman show. And I think it was called Take One Last Look. And this song, it's basically about a guy who's leaving, and it's like, take one last look before you go. And it's just so beautiful. And that came out right when I was in the middle of the divorce. And man, I must have listened to it just over and over and over again on YouTube. So Tom Waits was the one I was so happy to share in the beginning. If you can track down my Spotify, you'll see several different playlists, but there's one that I put together called Fiestamos Tom Waits. And that's got, my favorite of his songs over the years from the very beginning to the current. And what's cool is you can listen to like how his music has grown and changed. In the beginning, it feels like you're in just some like underground lounge in New York. And then his like voice gets more and more intense and raspy, and there's more instruments that come in, and really just a tremendous progression. And you might recognize some of the songs from different movies. He was actually the gold prospector in the Netflix Coen Brothers movie, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. So Tom Waits was amazing. Who else did I share? I also shared Townes Van Zandt. If you love songwriting, like these guys are all songwriters. Townes Van Zandt is, I think, the greatest songwriter to ever live. He's phenomenal. His self-titled album, Townes Van Zandt, is a great place to start. But you can't really go wrong with any of his albums. His stuff has been covered by so many people. He's like revered by other songwriters as being like the best. So Townes Van Zandt is absolutely incredible. I also shared, to mix it up, I shared Bob Moses. A little shout out to some of my Burning Man music. And who else did I share? Oh, Chris Whitley. So Chris Whitley was a guy who he was a singer-songwriter, guitar player who died of lung cancer, I think in about 2005. He never really got the notoriety that I thought he deserved. He had one big hit in the early 90s called Big Sky Country, which I loved as a kid. I was probably like 12 when that came out. I just loved it. And then fell in love with his music and all of it. And I finally got to see him live about 2 months after I turned 21. I was in college at Stanford, and he came into San Francisco, and he played this place called the Bimbo Lounge, which was like this amazing venue, this tiny little place. I just remember like red velvet everywhere. And watching Chris play was electrifying. There was something about how I just saw all this energy like sort of bursting from his heart through the guitar, and the feeling was like, the image I kept getting over and over again was this like angsty sort of teenager just playing the guitar, channeling all of that raw emotion, all of the things that like maybe were locked in that he just couldn't express, couldn't share freely, just came through in the music. And this guy was like rail thin, smoking cigarettes. And it was just the sheer magnitude of this guy's energy when he filled the room. It was so good. And I get it. His taste isn't for everybody, but man, seeing that guy live was amazing. And I got to see him a few years later in San Diego. He played this like super shitty place in San Diego that happened to be like 2 blocks from where I lived. I didn't even know that it was like a venue until I saw that he was coming and playing at this place. I was like, he's playing at that, what I thought was just a shitty little dive bar. And it turned out that was like maybe a year, maybe not even a full year before he died. So I was so glad I got to see him. Just tremendous. He's got an album called Perfect Day, it's all covers. And so Perfect Day is a Lou Reed song that he covers. But the whole album is of covers. So if you're someone who likes, hearing covers, I think some of the renditions on that Perfect Day album are absolutely tremendous. And then the last one that I shared today was Jackson Browne. Now, Jackson Browne is somebody that I hated his music. I didn't like the arrangements. I don't know what the word is. It was like not necessarily overproduced, but like the instrumentation. And I didn't like any of it. And a buddy of mine implored me. He's like, dude, you got to give this a chance. You need to listen to this album. And it was the solo acoustic album. At the time, it was the only one out that was volume 1. And so Jackson Browne went on a tour, and he just was playing everything acoustic, so either the guitar or the piano, and he would take requests from the audience. And he tells a bunch of stories about the songs. And with all of the other stuff that I found distracting stripped away, I could just really tune into his songwriting. And man, it's so good. It's so good. So if you're looking for some new music, or if you have heard of Jackson Browne but it never was really your thing, give this solo acoustic Volume 1 and Volume 2 a listen, because that, it'd be Tom Waits 1 and then Jackson Browne 2 as far as the soundtrack to my most sort of feely moments, and then Townes is the background music for all of my other life. But between Tom Waits and Jackson Browne, now, if you're feeling really depressed, if you're feeling really bummed out, well, if you go in with early Tom Waits or with Jackson Browne, certainly you'll feel like you have a companion there with you. But that may not be the music that lifts you out of it. So the album that I shared with my high school friends that I put on whenever, that I could just always trust, is Gang Starr, Moment of Truth. And, it's the hip hop beats from, I think it came out in 98. So I would have been a freshman in college. And man, Work and Moment of Truth, the tracks on that, the beats are so good. It's just that's the music that I listen to if you want to be shifted into a different state. But if you're looking for companionship while you're feeling really bummed out or you're really sad, man, there's nothing that beats that Jackson Browne solo acoustic Volumes 1 and 2. I remember when I just moved to Miami, and I found out that a good friend of mine from high school had committed suicide, and that was the album that I took with me. I queued up on my phone or whatever, and I just sat on the beach for hours listening to it. And that's an interesting thing, right? Have you ever had someone who's passed away, where you feel them? Do you feel them visiting you or coming back? I had a buddy of mine, actually the same guy who told me to listen to Jackson Browne. He used to talk about these dreams that he'd have where the light would change. You're in the dream and you're oh, this is a dream, whatever. And then all of a sudden, the cue for him was the lighting change, where it was almost like a play where it's a scene change, and the light would change, and then whatever would happen there. In his case, it was a conversation with a buddy of his who's passed away. I think a couple different friends, and it's happened to him over the years, where he has this conversation, and everything about it feels different. And even if you can't remember everything that happened in the dream, it's like your body heard it, or your soul or your consciousness heard it, and you wake up feeling different. Anyway, I heard, my friend would tell me about these dreams, and I'd never had that experience before. But after my buddy died, it was probably a year or two after he had passed away, I had a dream where it was just like that. I was in the dream. I was at some pool or whatever. And then all of a sudden the light changed. So in the dream, it was the clouds came in, and it changed it from that bright light to that kind of I don't know, almost a light sort of mustard yellow hue. And my buddy showed up, and we had a conversation, and he was just talking to me about the process of dying. He talked about how, he was hurting when he was alive. He was talking about things that he saw in my life, and, he was really happy that Jen and I started seeing each other. And so I guess it was more than just a couple years after he had passed. This might have been I don't even remember, 5 years or something. But he was talking about Jen, and he was talking about Wyatt, and man, it was I woke up from that dream, not dream, and I was I don't know how to say it, but I was just changed. He wasn't. It had been. We were friends in high school, and then in college we saw each other a little bit on breaks and stuff. But I didn't stay really close to him, so it wasn't he wouldn't be normally top of mind every day. So I wasn't necessarily. It wasn't if somebody's super, super close to you that you lost, where you're feeling that hole all the time. But after that dream, it was I felt something heal in me that I didn't even know was like wounded or unhealed. You know, I mean, I knew I missed him. Anytime Jimmy Buffett comes on, like I think about the guy. You used to listen to Buffett all the time. This guy he loved to sail. And, but that kind of dream like really, really changed things for me. So I'm curious, you know, I'd love to hear from you guys. So if you've ever had a dream like that or had that experience, and I've had it a few times, he's come back again. And then I've had a few other dreams, not where somebody who's passed shows up, but someone that I know is still alive, but like where we have a conversation, and the lighting change really is that cue for me where the light shifts and then there's like this conversation that happens. And I've checked in with folks after I've had those dreams, and, you know, sure enough, like whatever they told me in the dream has been happening. And a different friend of mine, he says all the time that like, he's like, dude, you come and we have conversations in dream time all the time. Because this guy will call me and he'll be like, hey, what's going on with this or going on with that? And I was like, how did you know? And he's like, you told me. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you come to me in dreams and we have conversations. We talk about all this stuff. He's like, sometimes it's so annoying because you don't know it. And so I just have to have the same conversation with you, like in this kind of plane. I was like, dude, you're crazy. Because I don't remember any of those. I mean, there have been a couple of dreams where I remember like hanging out with him, but not nearly to the frequency that he says happens. But he's just someone who has mastered like dream time, if that's even a thing. I don't even know. So, you know, I've like had a dream the other night that I was flying. I know people are having crazy dreams right now. So if you're one of these people that's like mastered the nighttime, how did you do it? So, you know, so sometimes we can get these messages, and but I would encourage you just to really pay attention. You know, if the energy changes in your dream, if the lighting changes. Like I had this dream the other night. This one was crazy. Like, do you guys know you have dreams? So a teacher of mine used to say that there's like 3 levels of dreams. There's a dream where your body's just like processing the garbage from the day. And that's sort of like, it's important, it's valuable, but it's sort of like a whatever. And then there's a dream where, how did it go? I think he said the second one was like, there's a dream where you're like working through stuff, where you're like solving some of your own inner problems or inner turmoil. And then there's another level of dream where something, spirit or creator or whatever, is communicating with you. And you know, it's like, and then there's like the level of dream where you're also like, you know, kind of controlling things. So I had this dream the other day where I was like being hunted, but they couldn't kill me. And anyway, I found myself on a planet that was basically, it was sort of like an intergalactic airport where it was like its own planet, but there were people and creatures of all sorts of different kinds. And I started having a conversation with this guy, and he says to me, he goes, oh, well, you know, where are you going? Like, where are you en route to? I was like, well, I'm going back to Earth. And he was like, oh yeah, Earth. He's like, that place is cool. I had a great adventure there. That was super fun. And I was like, well, where are you going? And he said some other planet, and he's like, oh, I'm going over here. And he's like, it's totally different than Earth, but it's cool. And there was just something about that moment. Like the rest of it's fuzzy. And I know that listening to people talk about their dreams is kind of annoying. But this particular one, it was like that. There was just something very punctuated about it. Something that was like everything came very crystal clear in that moment. And I left that dream being like, yeah, it was cool. Like, how cool is it that like this might just be an adventure, right? It's just an adventure. I heard this phenomenal podcast the other day, or not a podcast, it was a YouTube video. I can't remember the guy's name. It was on Del Bigtree's show. The headline is some stupid headline, which was like, you know, the doctor who predicted Corona has something to say. And it was like, that headline was stupid. But the last like 30 or 35 minutes of it was phenomenal. And the guy, this doctor, he's from Hawaii. This doctor just talks about like the process of life. And he's giving his plea that we don't like return back to normal, but that we create a new normal that's much healthier. And you go through the process of coming into being, only to, find ourselves going from cubicle to cubicle and, in carpeted rooms that are off-gassing toxins, to get into your car, to sit in traffic and pollution, to get home, to, stare at your phone, and then to stare at your watch, and then to stare at the TV screen, and to not be present with the food that you're eating, and to have all of this biologically sort of dead food with no active enzymes in it, just to become like, this shut down vitality version of ourselves. I'm not doing it justice, but if I can find it, maybe I'll post it on my Instagram. But it's this like beautiful thing, and then we go through this process of being shells of ourselves and not really tapping into our heart and to our energy and our vitality, not owning the uniqueness that is your life, not owning the uniqueness of like, oh my God, like we are stardust, and we have this like, in the arc of all of existence, we have just these brief moments to live and to breathe and to rejoice and to celebrate, and how all of that can be, lost in the shuffle of the stress of day to day, and the stress of, making ends meet, or trying to be right, or trying to prove a point, or wanting somebody to love you that just isn't able to love you the way that you want to be loved. And we lose the miracle that is this existence. And then it's over and we die, right? Which could be a great rebirth. If my dream is right, then we end up in some kind of, interplanetary hub waiting for our next adventure, choosing which place we want to go. Like, have you guys been watching the Netflix show Midnight Gospel? I've only seen an episode of it, but man, it's amazing. This creature gets to choose like the planets that he has this experience with, and I suspect that there might be more right in that. More accurately what this existence is like than not. So. Yeah, I don't know. Hey, I'm just happy you guys are here. I hope you're feeling good and enjoying yourselves. Pay attention to those dreams. Tap back into to the music. Get back into music that brings you joy, and know that you're not alone. It's been interesting going back and listening to some of the music, and seeing what's been my soundtrack for the last 15 years. And I'm reminded of what my dad told me when I went to college. His piece of advice was, he was like, "Listen, Jim, whatever comes up for you, whatever you find yourself feeling, you're not alone. Somebody's been there before, and they've written about it." True words from an English major. But listening to some of these songs, and like there's Jackson Browne in one of his songs, he's got this line that says, "No matter how fast I run, I can never run away from me." And man, if that doesn't capture like the thing that drives me, and the passion to come back home, to come back to yourself, or as Tom Waits says, to come on up to the house. And I've been doing a deep dive into some essential oil training. I found some resources, some texts that were hard to find, that are tying in, the essential oils from the Chinese medicine point of view. And I'm going to give a whole other talk on that in a bit, once I had a chance to fully assimilate it and digest it. But one of the things that I love about it is that, he's speaking to the nature of essence, right? And how an essential oil really is like the essence of the plant. It's the jing. It's that unfolding, that unfurling of nature. It's sort of like its energetic destiny, its energetic signature, right? Is like that essential oil. It's what makes peppermint. It's what makes lavender. It's what helps to keep it alive. And that when we use these essential oils, that they can come in and they can augment and boost our jing, our essence, right? Which is like this invitation and support to come on home, to come on back up to the house of your heart, to get down off that cross and to reconnect with what is it that makes you, you. What is that soundtrack of your life? What are those moments that pop into your head when that music is playing? And what can you do in this moment or the next moment? How can you breathe? How can you exist? What can you give yourself permission to feel or to express that would be as best as possible in any moment, representation of who you are, of what is your unique energetic signature? What is your unique destiny? What is the thing that makes you uniquely you? And to bring that out into the world. And so I'm super stoked to be learning about it. Like I said, I'll dive deeper into it later, but like using the nature and the wisdom of plant medicine to help evoke and support our own expression of ourselves and our own unique destiny, so that you can sing your song and to dance a good dance. So thank you guys, as always, for being here. I love you. I hope everyone that you are healthy and safe, and that everyone you know is healthy and safe as well. And I'll catch you guys next time. Cheers.